She didn't cause a scene. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, calm and composed. Yet, just minutes later, she found herself under interrogation behind closed doors. Why? Because she was a black woman in the exclusive first class lounge at Cleargate Airport, USA. Among passengers clad in designer outfits and rolling glossy suitcases, a modestly dressed woman moved quietly, towing a worn carry-on behind her. Her gaze was serene, devoid of arrogance, yet every pair of eyes around her brimmed with suspicion. The security manager signaled coldly. A lead flight attendant feigned indifference. A radio button clicked. She may not have known she was being watched, or perhaps she did, yet chose to remain silent and unruffled. Then, in full view of the other travelers, two security officers approached with tense expressions and probing stares. But there was something they didn't know. An unseen power held by this seemingly ordinary woman, one that governed the entire airport. And when she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, the fate of an entire airline began to shift forever. This wasn't just a story about racial prejudice. This was the moment truth forced a system to reckon, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. Welcome to the Black Side Stories. Before we continue, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe to our channel and help us share their stories. The first class lounge at Cleargate Airport is reserved for the elite. An opulent space of gleaming marble floors, leather armchairs, and soft music whispering sophistication. The guests here radiate power and wealth. High-end fashions, polished leather luggage, and expensive jewelry all on display. But today, something was different. Through that sea of extravagance walked a black woman whose presence shattered the familiar elegance. Her name was Diana Carter. She wore a simple dress, her hair neatly pinned back, no flashy accessories, no designer handbags, no costly jewelry. Only a faded navy carry-on in one hand and a phone displaying a clear first class e-ticket in the other. From the moment Diana stepped into the priority area, all eyes locked onto her. No one spoke, but the air crackled with unspoken doubt. Passengers whispered among themselves, their covert glances laden with curiosity and skepticism. A few airport staff stationed at a distance began murmuring into their radios, eyeing her, as if weighing whether she belonged here at all. Diana seemed to sense the scrutiny, yet her face remained perfectly composed. She stood with quiet dignity, every subtle movement magnified under the watchful eyes around her. Occasionally, she glanced at her phone, as if reaffirming her right to be there, a calm so steady it only intensified everyone's attention, as though her mere presence were a challenge to some unwritten rule. Across the lounge, Victoria Hayes, the veteran security supervisor known for her strict, no-nonsense approach, zeroed in on Diana. Victoria missed nothing. She studied Diana from her scuffed shoes to her slightly frayed carry-on, from her understated hairstyle to the oddly serene expression on her face. Every detail fueled her suspicion. Without hesitation, Victoria tapped her radio, her voice chillingly precise. Priority Area 1. Suspicious passenger. Initiate immediate inspection. Moments later, two security officers emerged from the main entrance and strode toward Diana. Their gazes were locked on her. Their hands hovered over their radios. Steps tight with anticipation, yet Diana remained unmoved, utterly unflappable. She understood this was only the beginning of a considerable test, but what no one expected was that Diana Carter was far more than a routine traveler. A secret of immense power lay hidden, one capable of upending the entire dynamic of this first-class lounge. And this was just the beginning. The same moment the two security officers began moving toward Diana, Victoria Hayes' gaze never left her, not even for a second. From the surveillance desk, Victoria was infamous at Cleargate Airport for her extreme strictness, perfectionism, and unrelenting coldness. With over 15 years of experience, she handled the most uncomfortable situations with a poker face and a voice as hard as stone. Yet today, Diana Carter's unassuming presence unsettled her in a way nothing had before. Victoria knitted her brows and coldly reevaluated the woman before her. Everything she saw in Diana contradicted the image of a VIP passenger Victoria always envisioned. In Victoria's mind, A first-class traveler not only had to be impeccably dressed, but also visibly wealthy and powerful. Diana's simplicity felt like a direct affront to the upscale environment Victoria oversaw. Victoria glanced at the security monitor, names, seat classes, and passenger data scrolling rapidly across the screen. Diana's ticket was crystal clear: Diana Carter, first class, priority boarding. But to Victoria, this wasn't a technicality. It was about prejudice, a bias so entrenched that she was convinced Diana must be up to something shady, perhaps exploiting a cheap upgrade offer, or worse, a passenger who didn't belong there at all. Without hesitation, Victoria tapped her radio again, her words sharp and icy. Verify the identity of the black woman at the end of the priority line immediately. I need to know exactly who she is and why she's here. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, and it made the entire security desk tense. Some officers exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't a routine safety check, but a request born of their supervisor's unspoken prejudice. Diana calmly waited her turn at the boarding pass checkpoint, showing no sign of fear. A moment later, a young female attendant approached, polite but wary. "Excuse me, may I recheck your ticket and ID, please?" Unfazed, Diana produced her phone, displaying the e-ticket along with her passport, as though she'd anticipated this. But from the surveillance desk, Victoria cut in over the radio. "Hold on. Don't clear her yet. Ask her to explain the purpose of her trip and confirm her seat class in detail. I don't want any mistakes in the priority area." Victoria's cold insistence made the attendant hesitate, though she complied. Avoiding Diana's steady gaze, she asked softly, embarrassed, "Miss Carter, could you please confirm the reason for your trip and why you're using priority boarding?" Only then did Diana look directly toward the security desk, locking eyes with Victoria's suspicious stare. She neither glared nor wavered. Her calm communicated that she fully understood what was happening and was ready to face it with unshakable poise. "I'm flying to Seattle on business," Diana replied, her voice clear and crisp like crystal, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "And yes, my ticket is confirmed as first class." Victoria Hayes allowed a faint, ice-cold smile to flicker across her stern face. Even though Diana had answered perfectly, Victoria remained unsatisfied. This was no longer just a routine security procedure. It had become a covert battle between two women, one wielding security authority and ingrained bias, the other exuding serene confidence and quiet dignity. The tension in the air grew heavier. The nearby security staff waited anxiously, and surrounding passengers focused their attention on the checkpoint. Unease rippled outward, foreshadowing a confrontation that was about to intensify. When Diana's gaze met Victoria's, the space around the boarding desk froze. Victoria strode down from the surveillance desk toward Diana, each footstep echoing heavily against the marble floor. Her eyes were sharp and provocative, as though this had ceased to be a routine security matter and had become a silent battle between authority and human dignity. Victoria halted in front of Diana and cast a cold glance at the e-ticket on her phone. She lingered just long enough to make her point, then lowered her voice so that every word landed like an ice-cold pebble. "You're in the wrong line. Economy is over there." Her statement, though quiet, carried clear intent. Nearby passengers immediately turned to stare, curiosity mixed with discomfort in their eyes. The once elegant lounge now felt suffocating. Everyone sensed that Victoria was deliberately belittling Diana, and they all waited for an angry response. But Diana did not flinch. Instead of reacting in anger, she lifted her chin and met Victoria's eyes head-on. Her gaze was steady, unshaken, exuding calm resolve. A gentle smile curved her lips, not one of submission, but the smile of someone utterly confident in her own worth. "I know exactly where I belong." Diana's composed yet powerful reply froze Victoria for a heartbeat. A flicker of outrage sparked in Victoria's eyes, her pride stung by Diana's quiet challenge. To Victoria, who prided herself on controlling every situation, Diana's unwavering poise felt like a slap to the authority she wielded so firmly. Victoria clenched her jaw, forcing her face back to calm. Without another word, she turned to the officer at her side, her gaze ice-cold, her finger flicking in a silent command. Escort her to the interrogation room. We need to verify her information." The two officers immediately advanced on Diana, their expressions conflicted but obedient. Diana offered no resistance, no argument. She simply nodded, as if she'd anticipated this moment, and followed them. Her stride was unhesitating and dignified, the wheels of her suitcase whispering across the marble, underscoring the heavy silence that now filled the first-class lounge. Victoria remained rooted to the spot, her eyes fixed on Diana's back, brimming with resentment. She vowed to make this woman understand the consequences of challenging her authority. Victoria had never felt so furious. To her, this was a matter of honor. She would not rest until she proved that no one could stand before Victoria Hayes and defy her power. What Victoria didn't know was that Diana Carter was far more than an ordinary passenger. Behind that unassuming exterior lay an invisible force, capable of turning the entire Cleargate Airport upside down with a single phone call. And Victoria was about to face consequences she could never have imagined. In the small, discreet room, the neon light overhead cast a cold glow as Diana sat upright, her hands resting lightly on the icy metal table. She showed no emotion. Her eyes remained calm and razor-sharp. The instant the door clicked shut behind her, Diana knew she was about to confront the most deep-seated, invisible prejudices face to face. Seated across from her was a tall security officer with a stone-cold expression, his features carved as if from marble. He flipped open his notebook, his icy gaze brazenly sizing Diana up before he spoke in a low, loaded voice. "What is your full name?" "Diana Carter," she replied crisply, her tone steady and unhesitating. He jotted a quick note, then looked up, his manner uncompromising. "What's the purpose of your flight today?" "Business," Diana answered calmly, offering no further detail. He sneered, suspicion flickering across his face as he eyed her simple attire. A gray turtleneck, basic slacks, low-heeled leather shoes. Nothing like the VIP image he encountered daily. "If this is a business trip, why are you dressed like this?" His tone turned harsher, as though questioning her character and worth. Diana did not flinch. Tilting her head, she met him with a gentle yet piercing look. "How I dress has nothing to do with my trip's purpose." "What are you implying?" The officer faltered, unprepared for such a sharp retort. He gestured to a female colleague, who began searching Diana's small bag. Inside the unassuming canvas sat her laptop, a notebook, and a large sealed envelope stamped with the Advalink Group's red wax logo. The woman held up the envelope, brows raised. "What's this?" "Work documents," Diana replied tersely, her voice firm. "We need to inspect it," the officer declared, his hand moving toward the seal. Before she could break it, Diana's voice rang out, measured and authoritative. "To view the contents, you'll need an attorney and a court order. Anything else would be illegal." Her words froze the room. The two officers exchanged startled looks, clearly taken aback by her calm command of legal rights. They'd never encountered a passenger so composed, so resolute. Outside, Victoria watched. On the camera feed, her smug smile slowly fading as she witnessed Diana's quiet strength and legal savvy. Victoria felt both irritation and a flicker of unease. She hadn't expected her intended target to respond so decisively. Inside the interrogation room, Diana said nothing more. She slipped the envelope back into her bag and zipped it shut, a silent declaration of her authority. Locking eyes with the officers, she added in a steady tone, "If this is a random security check, note that in your report. If someone specifically requested this, I want the reason in writing." The officers were speechless. The balance of power had shifted. Diana Carter now controlled the situation. What Victoria didn't yet know was that Diana had silently recorded every detail, ready to use it as evidence in her internal audit. This was no longer just Diana's personal battle. It was about defending the dignity of every passenger who might otherwise fall victim to invisible bias. When Diana stepped aboard the plane, she realized the story of prejudice was far from over. The moment she appeared at the first-class cabin entrance, every pair of eyes snapped to her. Curiosity mingled with suspicion, almost as if she were a stranger from another world, though she had just endured a demeaning, unfair interrogation. Diana remained composed, quietly making her way to her assigned seat. Not long after Diana settled in, Michelle Hayes, the flight's lead attendant and Victoria's close cousin, began service in first class. Just like her cousin, Michelle was renowned at Grand Sky Airlines for her polished professionalism, yet beneath that veneer lay a cold, judgmental streak. She evaluated passengers by appearance and status. Having heard Victoria's tales of the odd woman in the lounge, Michelle was determined that Diana would not enjoy a single comfortable moment on this flight. With a practiced smile, Michelle glided down the aisle, offering warm towels and drinks to each wealthy passenger. She greeted them courteously, inquiring after their needs and comfort. But when she reached Diana's row, her expression froze. She shot Diana a passing glance of complete indifference, then turned away as if Diana were nothing more than an empty seat, unworthy of her attention. That deliberate snub was unmistakable, a clear message to Diana and everyone around her that this passenger didn't belong here. Neighbors shifted in their seats. Some whispered under their breaths. Others shook their heads in thinly veiled displeasure. Yet no one dared speak up. Beside Diana sat a well-heeled middle-aged man in a bespoke suit, Rolex gleaming on his wrist. He'd watched Diana board, and Michelle's cold dismissal only emboldened his contempt. Leaning toward Diana with a mocking smirk, he murmured just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Looks like anyone with enough money can buy a first-class seat these days, huh?" His sneer carried in the cabin's hush. A few passengers chuckled, others averted their eyes, tacitly supporting his prejudice. But Diana didn't react the way he expected. She simply turned her head, her gaze calm, confident, and composed. With a gentle smile and a quietly sharp tone, she replied, "Do you really think money alone earns you a place like this?" The man stiffened, clearly caught off guard by her pointed retort. He looked away, his face a brief flash of embarrassment and discomfort. Unwilling to continue the conversation, Diana said nothing more. Her politeness remained immaculate. But inside, she knew this battle wouldn't end so easily. Just as Diana gazed out the window, lost in thought about everything she'd endured, a cold voice snapped her back to the tense reality of this flight. "Excuse me, Miss Carter. We need you to move to a seat in the back for weight distribution." Michelle Hayes stood there, her posture rigid, her professional smile failing to mask a vicious chill. She spoke loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, drawing curious and skeptical glances toward Diana. Diana turned, locking eyes with Michelle, and held her silence for a few seconds, as if to confirm she'd heard correctly. That momentary pause unsettled Michelle, but she quickly recovered, her gaze conveying a silent challenge. Diana knew this wasn't a genuine safety request. It was a pointed insult meant to humiliate her in front of every first-class passenger. "Wait, distribution," Diana repeated calmly, enunciating each word with sharp authority. "Then why am I the only one being asked to move?" Michelle froze. She was used to compliant travelers who never questioned instructions, but Diana's unwavering firmness left her no room to hide her bias. All around, other passengers leaned forward. Some exchanged curious looks, others whispered among themselves, their eyes betraying doubt at the flight attendant's flimsy excuse. The cabin's atmosphere grew stifling, the tension almost palpable. Flustered, Michelle finally stammered, "It's just standard procedure. Your cooperation is appreciated." But her feeble explanation only undermined her credibility further. The injustice and absurdity of her demand were now obvious to everyone. Diana said nothing. Instead, she calmly retrieved her phone and opened Advalink Group's secure internal app. With steady fingers, she typed a concise but powerful message. Level 3 audit complete. Initiate official internal investigation immediately. Seconds later, the message was sent. Diana knew that from this moment on, every discriminatory act by Victoria, Michelle, and their cohorts was in her hands and would be the focus of an irreversible internal probe. Michelle realized she had just made a serious mistake, but she had no idea of the magnitude. In her mind, Diana was still an ordinary woman, easily dismissed. Soon, though, Michelle would face severe consequences triggered by her own prejudice and arrogance. Diana set her phone down, then looked at Michelle again, this time with a gaze deeper and sharper than ever before. "If your concern really is weight distribution, then perhaps the problem isn't my seat." Michelle's face drained of color. She took a step back, utterly speechless. The cabin fell into complete silence. Diana remained seated, expression unchanged, but the power in her quiet composure was shaking the very foundations of Michelle and Victoria's fabricated authority. The instant the aircraft's wheels touched down on Seattle's runway, the tension in the cabin felt almost palpable. Diana remained composed and courteous, unmoved by the ordeal she'd just endured, but she knew the decisive moment had arrived. As soon as the plane came to a complete stop and the door opened, an airport official approached Diana with a serious expression. "Miss Carter, please come with us." Diana offered no surprise or protest. She rose gracefully, her eyes locking for a moment on Michelle Hayes, the lead flight attendant still standing awkwardly nearby. Michelle averted her gaze, clearly unsettled by Diana's unwavering confidence. Minutes later, Diana found herself ushered into a small, austere conference room in the airport's secure area. A long, dark wood table dominated the space, surrounded by swivel chairs. Already seated were a senior executive from Grand Sky Airlines, two uniformed security officers, Michelle Hayes, her face drawn and anxious, and an FAA official, stern and attentive. Every gaze snapped to Diana the moment she entered. Silence reigned, thick with suspicion, as if everyone expected her to stumble through an apology or a humiliating explanation. But Diana remained unhurried. She settled into her chair, her eyes sweeping the room before resting on Michelle, whose panic was now obvious. Michelle clenched her trembling hands on the table, realizing she'd walked into a fight she couldn't control. "Miss Carter," the Grand Sky representative began stiffly, breaking the silence. "We have reports that you caused a disturbance and refused to comply with safety requests from our crew." Diana said nothing. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the large, red wax-sealed envelope bearing the Advalink Group's crest. Her movements were deliberate and powerful. Everyone sensed something important was coming. Carefully, she opened the envelope and extracted a premium-quality document printed with her name and title at Advalink Group. She placed it on the table and spoke clearly, each word carrying the authority of her position. "I am Diana Carter, Senior Ethics Auditor for Advalink Group." She paused, her eyes gliding over every face in the room before continuing. "And I regret to inform you that Grand Sky Airlines has failed this audit in its entirety." Immediate shock filled the room. The airline executive's face went ashen. He had no prior knowledge of this secret internal audit. The security officers exchanged bewildered looks, while the FAA official instantly began furiously taking notes. Michelle Hayes stiffened as well, her complexion drained. She realized in that instant the gravity of Diana's declaration. No one had anticipated that the unassuming woman they deliberately insulted held the power to determine the airline's financial and reputational fate. Diana remained calm, but her tone grew firmer and unforgiving. "All acts of discrimination, disrespect, and contempt I experienced today have been fully documented. What disappoints me most is not the behavior of a few individuals, but the culture of prejudice tolerated at the management level of Grand Sky Airlines." The airline representative opened his mouth to offer a weak apology, but Diana raised a hand to stop him. "I am not here for a simple apology." She looked him squarely in the eye. "What I need to see is the courage of this airline to confront and correct these serious cultural and operational failures." No one dared respond. Diana's authority and unyielding stance dominated the room. Diana didn't leave them waiting long. Calmly, she pulled her phone from her bag and tapped the connection to the projection screen at the far end of the room. "Now I'd like you to see for yourselves," Diana said, her voice firm and unyielding. Seconds later, the large screen flared to life, revealing high-definition video, secretly recorded footage of Victoria Hayes and Michelle Hayes engaging in outright racial discrimination. Their hateful remarks, dismissive stares, and cold, triumphant smirks played out in vivid detail, leaving no room for denial. Every insult, every gesture of contempt, was laid bare for all to see. The Grand Sky Airlines executive's face drained of color, his eyes wide with horror as he realized that what he'd taken for routine professionalism was, in fact, irrefutable. Proof of a deep-seated culture of prejudice. Across the room, Michelle sat frozen, her body trembling, cold sweat beading at her temples. She watched in horror as her own actions and Victoria's were broadcast before the stern FAA official and the airline's leadership team. The airline representative rose, shoulders slumped, and addressed Diana in a desperate, halting voice. "Miss Carter, on behalf of Grand Sky Airlines, I offer our sincerest apologies. This conduct is utterly unacceptable, and we will." Diana raised a hand to cut him off, her gaze steely. "I'm not here for apologies." She held his eyes with unflinching intensity. "I want to see genuine accountability. I want you to acknowledge your flawed culture and actually change." Silence enveloped the room again. This time, the silence of shame and bitter defeat. Diana wasn't here to hear empty words. She was here to demand real transformation. The FAA official spoke up, his tone grave and authoritative. "This evidence reveals a serious ethical and service quality lapse at Grand Sky Airlines. We require an immediate, detailed report on how you will address these violations." Diana scanned the assembled executives and regulators, her expression cold but purposeful. Grand Sky Airlines has been warned repeatedly about discrimination, yet nothing meaningful has changed. Today, I expect not just isolated terminations, but a full restructuring of your systems to eradicate this toxic culture once and for all. Her words rang like a verdict, decisive, uncompromising, and final. Less than 24 hours after that tense meeting, Advalink Group, the airline's most powerful and essential financial partner, publicly announced it was suspending all merger negotiations with Grand Sky indefinitely. The firm's uncompromising statement spread instantly across major media outlets, sending shockwaves through the aviation and finance industries. Almost immediately, the vital $4.8 billion bailout that had been the airline's lifeline through months of crisis was frozen. Investors pulled out en masse. Grand Sky stock plummeted without pause, and the airline's leadership found itself paralyzed and directionless. In an instant, the distinguished carrier stood on the brink of bankruptcy, facing the darkest threat in its history. Inside the company, the repercussions were swift and brutal, especially for Victoria and Michelle Hayes, the very figures at the heart of the discrimination scandal. Victoria Hayes, who had long prided herself on absolute control at Cleargate Airport, was placed on indefinite suspension. The notice arrived at her office, cold, final, and offering no chance for explanation. The career she'd built over decades collapsed in a single day. At the same time, Michelle Hayes, the lead flight attendant who treated Diana with contempt, faced similarly harsh consequences. Grand Sky leadership permanently removed her from all first-class service duties. Every perk, privilege, and ounce of respect she'd enjoyed vanished. She was reassigned to low-profile domestic routes, forced to rebuild her career amid humiliation. But the fallout didn't stop with Victoria and Michelle. Every employee connected directly or indirectly to the incident was required to participate in a specialized anti-discrimination training program personally designed by Diana Carter. This wasn't a token gesture. It was a deep, systemic overhaul of company culture, an uncompromising lesson in human dignity, equality, and respect. Diana aimed to ensure that nothing like this would ever happen again at Grand Sky. Throughout the airline's offices, gloomy chaos reigned. Departments fell into disarray. Hundreds of panicked emails and calls flew back and forth as employees struggled to understand how a seemingly isolated incident could trigger a financial catastrophe of this magnitude. For Grand Sky Airlines, the dire penalties they now endured were more than a cautionary tale about discrimination. They were a resounding warning to the entire service industry. No one has the right to demean another, and prejudice carries an unbearably high price. A week after that unprecedented crisis, Cleargate Airport had slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Elegant travelers, gleaming suitcases, and busy flights once again filled the terminals with their familiar energy. Yet whispers of the scandal still drifted through the crowds, a reminder of how devastating prejudice and bias can be. One late afternoon, Diana returned to Cleargate, this time for a very different purpose. Gone were the suspicious glances and hateful remarks. She walked through the airport with her characteristic calm confidence, her face serene, devoid of any triumphal arrogance, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing justice had been served. She made her way down a busy corridor, Diana spotted a familiar figure tucked away at a small customer service desk in the public arrivals area. It was Victoria Hayes, the very woman who had once scorned and insulted her so cruelly. Now stripped of her authority, Victoria sat in a simple uniform, her name tag gone and her title erased. The powerful, cold self-assurance she'd once worn like armor had vanished, replaced by exhaustion and regret. Diana paused and watched from a distance. She felt no glee at Victoria's fallen state, only sadness for someone who'd had the chance to do right but had chosen poorly, blinded by prejudice and misplaced pride. Sensing someone's gaze, Victoria looked up slowly. When her eyes met Diana's, she trembled, shame and fear flickering across her face. In that moment, Diana saw that Victoria finally understood her mistake, but it was far too late to undo the past. Diana approached the desk and stood before Victoria. Head bowed, Victoria mumbled in embarrassment. I'm sorry. Diana didn't respond immediately. She simply looked at Victoria for a long, silent moment before speaking softly. You were right once, Victoria. I'm not like most people in first class. Her voice was gentle yet powerful, each word resonating in Victoria's mind. I didn't come here to sit in a seat. I came to see how many people still remembered how to treat another human being. Her words held no malice, no anger, only a profound kindness and strength. Tears welled in Victoria's eyes as she realized, for the first time, the weight of her wrongdoing. Diana nodded once, then turned and walked away, leaving Victoria in stunned silence. Passers-by, staff members, even those who overheard the exchange, paused, struck by the profound lesson Diana had imparted. This final encounter wasn't about displaying the power of a victor. It was Diana's way of sending a deeper message. Human dignity isn't measured by appearance or status, but by the respect and compassion we show one another. From that day on, the story of Diana Carter and Grand Sky Airlines became a lasting lesson. In honor, humility, and humanity, those who once discriminated learned that prejudice can never triumph over courage and truth, and that real power lies not in threats, but in kindness and the capacity for change. As Diana disappeared into the bustling crowd, she didn't look back. Around her, the airport fell into a thoughtful hush, as if every person present was silently reflecting on that vital lesson. And so Diana Carter's story came to a close, not just as the triumph of one individual over injustice, but as the victory of empathy and humanity over blind pride and prejudice, the lesson we would all do well to remember. We must always treat one another with respect and compassion, for in the end, that is the greatest power we each can hold. If this story has inspired you or given you something to think about, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, thought-provoking tales. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video. This has been the Black Side Stories. Until next time, remember, behind every great achievement is someone who stood watch, someone who believed, someone who preserved what matters when no one else was looking.